See this young man? That's Nick Wirth. In the cool 90s, he was not even 30 years old when he became the founder, owner, designer and engineer of the coolest F1 team Formula 1 has ever seen. He was only 28 when he accomplished all this, with his sheer enthusiasm and courage. It was perhaps this youthful confidence that made Simtek also the most tragic team in F1. I'm Wimbo, here's 3 seconds to leave a like. Nick Wirth. Nicholas John Peter Wirth was a bright young man who, after studying at the University College in London, became the youngest ever fellow of the Royal Institution of Mechanical Engineers. He loved motorsports, so he started working for Leighton House in 1988 alongside the great Adrian Newey, working on the active suspension of the March cars. He worked there until he started his own business with none other than Max Mosley in 1989. The business was called Simulation Technology Research, which was shortened to Simtek. The business was an engineering consultancy firm and they had plenty of work from the start due to the network Mosley already had. Soon they had an order to build a Formula 1 car for BMW, but that project was cancelled by the head office in Munich. The car they had built was granted a second chance through Andrea Moda. They became known as the worst F1 team that ever existed. But what can you expect from a company that makes ladies' shoes? The black S921 was beautiful and the people who knew anything about F1 saw that the design of the car was good, so he was asked to build a car for Bravo F1. It was a group of Spanish investors that wanted to start a brand new F1 team. The team was represented by Frenchman Jean-François Mounier, who died suddenly, and that cost the investors the bailout, and the Bravo F1 team never saw the light. So Nick Wirth had 3 attempts to find a place in Formula 1, but was left empty-handed. He did become the full owner of Simtek because Max Mosley sold his shares to become president of the FISA, that we know now as the FIA. The idea to start his own F1 team came up when his father said, "You keep having these problems. Have you ever thought of doing it yourself?" And that's how the Simtek F1 team started. Simtek F1 team. In August 1993, 3-time world champion Jack Brabham bought shares into the Simtek team. His son David had already driven an F1 car in his father's team a few years earlier. He became their first driver. Then Gerhard Berger's manager, Burkhard Hummel, advised Wirth to have a chat with Roland Ratzenberger. Wirth and Ratzenberger got along really well as they both were determined to make it into F1 after many setbacks. Ratzenberger had the support of a very wealthy businesswoman called Barbara Belau. She was willing to arrange sponsors if Roland Ratzenberger had the second seat in the team. This guaranteed him the first 5 races of the season, but they hoped to find more money for more races. This was when MTV Europe entered the scene. They paid $500,000 for the deal, but offered advertising on their channel at a reduced cost for sponsors. MTV in those days was a big cultural force. Everybody watched it and everybody wanted to be a part of it. This was in the days when MTV still played music videos and music related shows non-stop. This started to change, unfortunately, and soon they started making the reality shows that we see today. But let's not dwell on that too much. At the time, a new F1 team with a 28-year-old owner and MTV as a sponsor radiated fun and youthful enthusiasm, which was very attractive for a brand like Russell Athletic. The team was run with only 35 people and had only 15% of the budget that, for instance, Benetton and Williams had. The team, built on a shoestring budget, became very popular and everyone had a lot of sympathy for them, especially when they presented one of the most beautiful cars that ever participated in a Formula 1 championship. The purple and black livery with the MTV logo gave the car an amazing X-factor, and it was built by people who knew about aerodynamics. In those days there were more cars than grid spots, so Simtek wasn't always sure of a starting place. There were 28 cars at qualifying and only 26 made it to the race. David Brabham made it into the Brazilian Grand Prix, and in the second race, Brabham and Ratzenberger both made it into the race. Brabham, who had finished 12th in the race in Brazil, dropped out because he had a problem. But Ratzenberger finished the race in 11th place and things were looking good until that fateful weekend that we all remember. Ratzenberger's death. Roland Ratzenberger was a 33-year-old driver from Austria who desperately wanted a seat in Formula 1. His competitors in Formula 3000, Johnny Herbert and Eddie Irvine, had already made it onto the grid. He was close to getting a seat at the Jordan F1 team, but because he lost a sponsor, that didn't happen. He did find a seat eventually at Simtek, and we all know how it ended. During qualifying on Friday, he and David Brabham fixed some issues with the brakes, and both were satisfied with the result. Rubens Barrichello crashed that day and couldn't continue the rest of the weekend. This was perhaps already a forewarning of what was yet to come. On the Saturday quali, Ratzenberger went off the track at the Acque Minerali chicane and damaged his front wing. He didn't want to quit as his sponsors were in attendance, and that's when it happened. At full speed, just before the Villeneuve corner, the wing broke and became lodged under his car, making him crash at 314.9 km per hour. The impact was 500 G, the highest ever measured in a Formula 1 crash. Roland Ratzenberger lost his life that day, and the young, fun F1 team was in deep mourning. Together they decided that Brabham would race on Sunday, but his head was elsewhere and he left the race before it was done. Wirth felt very guilty, as he was the owner of the team and the designer of the car. The crash didn't just influence the team on a personal level, they also had sportive and financial problems that made it much harder for the team. The chassis was written off completely and there was no reserve chassis, so Simtek raced one car in Monaco, just like Williams did. Barbara Belau, in the meantime, was very impressed with how the team handled the loss of their driver, and she decided to help Simtek financially even more. She became shareholder in the team for 30%. Ratzenberger was replaced by Italian driver Andrea Montermini, who was the test driver of the team. In qualifying for the Grand Prix in Spain, Simtek was dealt another big blow. Montermini crashed into a concrete wall, and people thought it was certain that it was another fatality. The Italian's legs were sticking out of the car and it looked horrific. It turned out that his feet were broken, but it wasn't as bad as it looked. Simtek had to start all over again with building a second car, and the budget was already a big problem. The rest of the season was pretty uneventful, and especially Nick Wirth was looking forward to a fresh start in 1995. Things could only go better after what they had to endure in their first year. Or so he thought. 1995. The 1995 season started with Simtek getting a stronger customer engine from Ford, the same engine that was used by Benetton a year earlier, which won them the championship. Unfortunately, MTV had doubts about being their title sponsor and scrapped the financial contribution, but kept the discount for advertising for Simtek sponsors. Then David Brabham left to race for BMW in British touring cars, so Simtek lost their leading man. However, Flavio Briatore had a solution for them. The team boss of the Benetton team had a problem. He had 3 drivers for 2 seats: Michael Schumacher, Jos Verstappen and new hire Johnny Herbert. Jos Verstappen was promised 6 races in F1 by Briatore, but it wasn't specified which team that was for. So Simtek had a new lead driver, and Nick Wirth was a happy man. He wasn't very happy when at the first race the team didn't have the fire extinguishers they needed to have on board. They were sent separately on a cargo plane to Brazil, where the Grand Prix was held. The whole paddock was laughing when they couldn't practice on Friday, and that was on top of the jokes that were made about the new sponsor they had. It was an energy drinks company called Ecstasy that had promised them £15 million. Then there was a period that things looked up again. Jos Verstappen had a few very promising races where he passed a lot of fast drivers in his awesome looking S951. He was fast and impressed with his daring moves up the field. If only the reliability was better. The gearbox was a big issue that kept them DNFing, but the pace was promising and people believed in the miracle of Simtek. They hoped this would help them in attracting sponsors, because they were running on fumes. Wirth kept talking with investors, and one of them was a Swiss businessman that he never named in interviews. It was most likely the owner of the energy drinks company Ecstasy that signed a deal of approximately $15 million. A bank transfer was faxed to Nick Wirth, but the money never arrived. The documents were false, and Simtek was as good as broke. They had a debt of £6 million, and the dream of having a successful F1 team was crushed. When both drivers had a few crashes in Monaco during qualifying, both drivers couldn't even start the race. In June, the balance was made up and the decision was made to file for bankruptcy. The aftermath. What remains is the question, what if? If only they did have the money to continue. They looked so fast in those races, and with more money they could have fixed the reliability issues. Jos Verstappen had thrived in this environment with less pressure, and his career would have looked a lot different too. Simtek received a lot of sympathy from all over the world for what they had tried to achieve. Except for Bernie Ecclestone, he was less sentimental about it all. He said, "I think Wirth hung it out a bit and went into battle without making sure his guns were ready. It's a bit of an enthusiast approach." Well, Nick Wirth was a passionate enthusiast. He put himself out there as a young man of only 28 and he went for glory. He did build a beautiful car with a memorable livery, and things would have been very different if fate had decided differently on some of the drama that happened. I'll finish with a quote from Nick Wirth himself. "We don't want Learjets and helicopters. We just want the chance to do well." Subscribe. Take care now. Doei doei.